Welcome to the Autumn Brookman Show. Thanks for joining us for episode 18 as we continue our series on election issues. With the election coming up very soon, both candidates have been hammered on the issue of immigration. So let's see what's really going on. So what is going on in our nation with immigration? As usual, you will hear two completely different storylines about this issue. From one side, you will hear that struggling families attempting to have a better life have little choice but to cross our border illegally. From the other side, you'll hear, well, let's just take a look. So this is from CBZ Management. So they actually created an account on X just for the purpose of sharing directly with people what's going on because they've had so many challenges with the media downplaying their story. So they say the situation in Aurora, Colorado has gained attention as gangs and illegal immigrants have taken control of our properties. However, the larger issue is that the government has not only ignored the crisis, but also scapegoated us to avoid accountability. Where we stand now, and this was on October 15th, 2 of our properties in Aurora, Colorado remain under gang control. By gang control, we mean that most or all of the rental income is diverted to a criminal enterprise comprised of gang members and illegal immigrants instead of the rightful property owners. And they go on to say down here, the real issue is the rise in crime in Aurora, illegal immigration, and the city's attempt to shift the blame onto us. So they have all this documentation. They've talked to the chief of police, to city officials, to the mayor, to the attorney general. Just a lot of people where they've been trying to ask for help to address this issue of gangs taking over the properties that they manage. They say the bottom line is that the police failed to do their job, which allowed crime to escalate. When our tenants called for help, their calls were often ignored. And they have a video of Cindy Romero, who's a tenant, sharing her story about police neglect.
She's called 911 so often, they know her by name.
He said, ever considered leaving? If I could afford to leave, I wouldn't be there.
She says neighbors fall asleep to gunfire. Her car still damaged from an overnight shootout.
This is a bullet hole.
It was one of the few times Aurora police responded.
They will call me and say, I'm sorry, but we're not coming. We're not coming until it's a bad enough crime.
This week, her pleas for help were finally answered, not by the city, but by Councilwoman Danielle Jurenski.
I think that politics is being played here with people's lives.
They left us there to die.
And she's not the only one having issues with crime from illegal immigration. Let's take a look at the story of Laken Riley. This headline reads, Our nation was robbed. Former President Trump mentions death of Laken Riley while at Cobb County rally. It says, right here in Georgia, our nation was robbed of a brilliant 22-year-old nursing student, Laken Riley, the former president said in part. Laken was a brilliant young student, top of her class, going to be a great nursing student. Everyone admired her. She was killed viciously while out on a jog. She was assaulted, beaten, and horrifically murdered by an illegal alien. You will see some narratives that say these crimes are exaggerated or say things like U.S. citizens commit crimes at a higher rate. And I actually found this article here. It says, this is from the National Institute of Justice. It says, undocumented immigrant offending rates lower than U.S.-born citizen rate. And so they are focusing on violent crime. Now, I don't put much merit into articles like this, first of all, because if you're looking at all crime, well, undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants, have a 100% crime rate because they entered the country illegally, which of course is higher than the crime rate for U.S. citizens. And if you're looking at violent crime, like we're trusting the data that they're getting when they don't even know how many illegal immigrants are in this country. And we'll look a little bit later at some of that data, but they're estimating how many of them are here. So to make a comparison like this just shows a lack of understanding of the real issue of what's going on. And at the same time, what rate is acceptable? right? Is it acceptable to have one vicious murderer for every 100,000 people? Is it acceptable if it's for every 1,000? At what point do we decide that the value of our citizens' lives in our country is important? We also need to remember that not all crimes are reported, especially when people are having stories like this where they lose faith in law enforcement. They're going to stop reporting crimes. And not all criminals are caught. We still have places in our nation who don't even want to cooperate with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Let's take a look at the stance of San Francisco. They call themselves a sanctuary city. In 1989, San Francisco passed the City and County of Refuge Ordinance. The Sanctuary Ordinance generally prohibits city employees from using city funds or resources to assist Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the enforcement of federal immigration law unless such assistance is required by federal or state law. So again, ICE is out trying to enforce immigration laws, and we have various cities in our nation who are calling themselves sanctuary cities, saying that they won't cooperate with federal law enforcement. Now, I certainly wouldn't call San Francisco a model city. I've been there. I know people who are near the area, and I have not heard great things about the progress of San Francisco. In fact, just the opposite. This would be a city on decline, so I would not say that their policy has done any good for them. But there are also many other cities who bear this title of sanctuary city, which of course sounds wonderful. It sounds like they're helpful in creating a safe place, but what they're doing is they're stopping law enforcement from enforcing the law. So just what sorts of things does ICE do? So I have this article from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The headline says ICE arrests 171 non-citizens with pending charges or convictions for murder, homicide, or assault against children during nationwide law enforcement effort. So really, in effect, what these sanctuary cities are doing is they're preventing ICE from obtaining, criminals and sending them out of the country before they commit a crime. Right now, they're waiting until after they commit a violent crime. So until after somebody is dead or somebody has been assaulted. And in this case, all of these crimes from these 171 non-citizens were done against children. So let's take a look at some of these. A 53-year-old citizen of El Salvador in Tacoma, Washington, convicted of felony child molestation in the first degree. A 27-year-old citizen of El Salvador in Los Angeles, convicted of lewd or lascivious acts with a child under 14 years old. 45-year-old citizen of Mexico in Dallas, convicted of aggravated sexual assault of a child. 35-year-old citizen of Mexico in Chicago, convicted of sexual assault of a child. 33-year-old of Mexico in Denver, convicted of murder. Right? So, they're coming from several different countries, and they're all over our nation, in the state of Washington, in the state of California, in the state of Texas, in the state of Illinois, in the state of Colorado. So you've probably heard it said, every state is now a border state. And this is why, right? We have places who are inviting illegal immigrants to come there, saying that we won't cooperate with law enforcement, and waiting until a violent crime occurs for ICE to be able to deal with the problem. So this is a huge issue. We need law and order to come back. We need our immigration system to have its laws actually enforced. Without law and order, there is no justice. And then victims are helpless and the criminals rule. Now let's just take a look at some of those numbers just so we can get a bit of an idea. This is from USA Facts. It says border officials encountered 11 million unauthorized migrants attempting to enter the U.S. between October of 2019 and June 2024. Data on these border encounters, which include people attempting to enter the country or apprehended trying to cross the border without inspection, helps the government estimate the number of individuals illegally entering the U.S. So I just wanted to be clear about that. This is an estimation based on the people they actually encounter. We don't know how many there are. So when people give you all these official numbers of their crime rates and all of that, we don't really know. These are estimates based on the people that they actually do encounter and speak with. And we can see All right, so in 2020, we have numbers that are below 500,000. And then in 2022, it jumps up to past 2 million. All right, that is a huge jump. And again, this is just the apprehensions and expulsions. This isn't all of the people who have come across the border, but there's just no way for us to keep up with that. We have these cities that are not cooperating with ICE, that are drawing in illegal immigrants who are offering services and things to them. And then we have our own citizens who are struggling, who the loss of life, the loss of loved ones, or people who are currently dealing with crime that's not being dealt with. I mean, we have a huge problem in our nation. So let's see what our candidates are going to do in response. First, let's see the response of Harris to this. Well, she did an interview with Brett Baer where he asked about illegal immigration. So let's take a listen to this interview.
Back to the original premise. Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungari's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss, sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in
her?
all fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration, even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist, they will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that's going to get fixed, Brett. Well, that's how this system works.
That's the premise of this question. There were 90-plus executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because There's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it.
So let's take a look at what Trump has to say about this issue.
All the time, I'll solve the border problems within 24 hours of taking office.
Echoing campaign promises from his first run for the White House, former President Donald Trump has vowed to crack down on immigration again if he's elected to a second term in office. Some of the policies he wants to implement may sound familiar, but others would be unprecedented. Trump has said he would bring back his Remain in Mexico program, which forced non-Mexican asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for the resolution of their cases. The program was terminated by President Joe Biden, who promised more humane and orderly immigration policies. Trump has also said he will seek to detain all migrants caught crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally, ending what he calls catch and release. And he has pledged to close gaps in the border wall, a core promise from his 2016 campaign if he returns to the White House.
I will immediately reinstate and expand the wildly successful Trump travel ban on entry from terror-plagued countries, territories, and places.
In an October speech, Trump pledged to restrict U.S. entry to people from the Gaza Strip, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and, quote, anywhere else that threatens our security. Trump also said he would bar the entry of immigrants who support Hamas and send deportation officers to pro-Hamas protests.
If you support Hamas or any ideology that's having to do with that, or any of the other really sick thoughts that go through people's minds, very dangerous thoughts, you're disqualified.
Trump also plans to launch the largest deportation effort in U.S. history. According to a report from the New York Times, Trump aims to deport millions of illegal immigrants with large-scale roundups and by creating camps to hold them while they await removal. He's also vowed to take aggressive new steps with the help of the National Guard to deport immigrants with criminal records and suspected gang members.
So I hope you can see the vast difference between what Harris has to say and what Trump has to say. Trump has specific ideas, specific orders that he can put out. He's not waiting for Congress to fix this problem. He will be able to change the way that these laws are enforced. And I think a huge lack of understanding is why anyone would disagree with this. Some people will make it look like this isn't being nice to migrants or that somehow there's a humanitarian issue with how they're treated. But it just shows a lack of understanding of what's going on. These are real crimes. There's drugs coming through that border. There's sex trafficking coming through the border. We've already looked at issues of gangs taking over buildings in our nation. We've already looked at issues of murder happening in our nation at the hands of illegal immigrants. So we need to take a look at reality of what's going on, and that is what Trump is doing. Trump is trying to protect our nation, to protect our citizens and keep us safe by having law and order, by allowing immigrants to enter through a legal process so that we aren't just allowing gangs to come in and take over parts of our country. And so we're not allowing cruel and violent criminals to come into our nation at all. They just don't have any place here. And so let's take a quick look at actually one of Trump's rallies to see what he has to say.
Thank you. Thank you. This isn't just affecting me. This is affecting all of you as well. We've got to get Trump back in office. We've got to get it done. With Trump's help, we can take this state back over. We can make a difference. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, for believing me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're beautiful. You're very brave. Very brave. Thank you, darling. Thank you very much. She's very brave. Getting all of the evidence and all of that footage I just said you're very brave, Cindy. Thank you very much. Really a big help. And because of Cindy and others like Cindy, the radical left can't say it never happened, because there we have it. And I promise you this, Cindy, that Kamala Harris's reign of terror ends the day I take the oath of office. It ends. Your community will no longer live in fear. You will once again have a protector in the White House. I'm going to be a protector.
So there you have it. Trump says he's going to be a protector, right? That's his mindset around this issue, is protecting our citizens, protecting our nation. And I don't know if you recognized who Trump had on stage with him. This was the same woman who we saw earlier. This was Cindy from Aurora, who is dealing with the issue of gang violence, of gangs at her property that have been taking over the properties of CBZ Management. And we've seen this over and over again from Trump, where he is taking a look at people's stories, at what they have to say. He's lifting them up and giving them a platform to share what's going on in their lives and what the problems are in our nation. And what we see from the Harris administration is a dismissal of people's experiences, just a, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I'm sorry that you had that happen to you, but no actual change of policy, nothing to address what's actually going on and take care of the needs of the people of our nation. So illegal immigration, there's just a clear choice. There's only one candidate who has actual policy plans to change the trajectory of what's happening in our country. There's only one candidate who has an emphasis on protecting the people, who's listening to the stories of what's happening, and who cares about keeping our citizens safe. And that person is Donald Trump. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode as we took a look at this issue of illegal immigration. I would love to hear what you have to say, hear what stories you've heard, or how maybe you've had experience with this issue and what you've seen. So please share that with us. You can connect with us on our social media pages, or you can leave a comment below. And remember to live in truth.